Thousands of flat owners have been facing huge bills for fire safety improvements after 2017's Grenfell disaster, when flames spread through combustible cladding. People who live in blocks higher than 18 metres won't have to pay. But today, MPs will debate proposals to prevent leaseholders in lower blocks from bearing any kind of costs, and said the bill would go to the developers. We can talk now to Steve Day from the Residents' Committee at Woolwich Royal Artillery Quays in South East London, and also to Bishop Tomlin, Bishop of Kensington in London and Vice Chair of the Archbishop of Canterbury's Housing Commission. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Morning.
Beginning with you, Steve Day, why do you see this as an important day for your campaign?
Well, firstly, thank you to Bishop Graham and the 3 archbishops and 43 bishops for supporting protecting leaseholders. We are very grateful. Martha, what I'd like to say is the government has not solved the crisis. Leaseholders are still liable for these non-cladding costs, indirect costs such as waking watch up to £1,000 a month and insurance hikes of up to 1,000%. For instance, just to give you some colour, leaseholders in a development in Salford have around £50,000 per flat for these non-cladding costs, and these are not covered by Robert Jenrick's deal. Now, with the fire safety bill going through Parliament
should explain
today,
what the Robert Jenrick deal is. He's the community secretary, and this was to mean that people wouldn't have to pay, in the lower box wouldn't have to pay more than £50 per month for the cladding costs.
And that's correct, but crucially, it's excluding the non-cladding costs up to 50k, waking watch up to £1,000 a month per flat, and insurance for up to 1,000%. So there's quite a lot missing. Although we are very grateful because it's a good first step. It's obviously not going to stop people going into bankruptcy. Now, the fire safety bill going through Parliament today is going to bring in all buildings of all heights and require the fire brigade to come in and basically issue orders for instant remediation and instant within 28 days of serious internal defects towards fire safety. Now, these bills will initially be put on the building owner, who will then transfer these onto leaseholders and pushing them towards bankruptcy and financial ruin. So our crucial ask today of MPs, now we are aware of all of their misgivings about the amendment, but this Parliament amendment protects leaseholders from that building owner after the fire brigade has issued their notice, pushing the capital costs, which could bankrupt them potentially, onto the leaseholders. Now, a lot of MPs have said, well, why this bill? It's the wrong bill. Well, it's the only chance we have today to stop bankruptcy tomorrow. Well, and that's what I would say to that.
Well, let me bring in the Bishop of Kensington now, Bishop Graham. And the government has said to us in a statement, they say they support the intention to protect leaseholders from these so-called remediation costs, but they do disagree that the fire safety bill is the right vehicle to address the issue.
I think the key issue here is what Steve is saying about protecting leaseholders. It seems to me that Steve's making a very good point that if the bill that goes through today unamended actually ends up with the possibility of building owners passing on the bills to leaseholders, that doesn't seem fair. It seems to me it's difficult to make a moral case for the costs of remediation to be passed on to leaseholders in any way. And one of the things that our Archbishop's Commission has been saying is that the wider housing crisis, of which cladding is really just a symptom, won't be solved without a kind of wider shared element of sacrifice. We've just been hearing about Lent on Thought for Today. We're leading up to Easter, and sacrifice is right at the heart of Christian faith. Healing doesn't come without sacrifice, and it seems to me that at the moment the sacrifices of the housing crisis are being borne unequally by people who are living in substandard, unsafe accommodation, like those in houses and blocks that are covered in unsafe cladding. We're saying that sacrifice needs to be borne across the board, and particularly that actually if there is a moral case to be made as to who pays for that at the end of the day, it has to go back to those who originally put up the buildings. It's like if you buy a car and you discover a dangerous flaw in it, you should be able to go back to the manufacturer to put it right rather than having to pay for it yourself.
Would you acknowledge that the government has moved on this with the new package, which we're referring to, that lower-rise buildings, they say, with a lower risk to safety, are getting new protection, what the government describes as a generous new scheme, paying for cladding removal through a long-term, low-interest financing arrangement?
Definitely, the government has made a good step forward, but it is only one step in a long journey. And it seems at the moment that all the estimates suggest that actually it's going to cost quite a bit more than the government has put aside at the moment to really remedy the cladding issue. And in my mind is very much the Grenfell community, because they're in the patch that I look after. The reminders of the tragedy are still raw for them. The cladding issue is a constant reminder of what happened to them, which is why in the Commission that we've urged for the 5-year anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire in June 2022 as a good target to aim for the costs of cladding to be fully remediated. And I don't think at the moment the proposals from the government actually do see a target for that to be done by that date.
What do you think about the proposal for introducing a levy and tax on developers? This is what the government's suggesting to contribute to what they say is righting the wrongs of the past.
Well, again, it's a good step, but I think in the government announcement, that's only going to bring in around $2 billion. I think we're going to need quite a bit more than that to remedy this problem. And I think, as I say, the cladding issue is part of a wider issue, which is the housing crisis in our nation. And one of the things that the Commission has been calling for is a long-term plan to solve the housing crisis, of which cladding is simply just one symptom. It's a crisis that's been defeating governments for the last 50 years. It will continue to defeat governments over the next 50 years unless we have a real plan for 20 years' time to work out how, as a nation, we're going to provide enough truly affordable housing for people that is properly safe, that enables everyone to have the chance to live in a house which is sustainable, which is safe, and a good, satisfying place to live in. So what we're calling for a government to do is a long-term plan, which goes beyond this government, that all governments are signed up to. It's like climate change. We have a target of 2050 carbon neutral, and that's driving change in the present. We need something similar with housing.
Bishop Graham Tomlin, Steve Day, thank you both.